The wagon had become their world. 4 walls of weathered wood beneath a canvas sky that leaked memories of rain. Elena counted 23 days since they'd stopped moving. Since the last horse had collapsed and Papa had walked into the desert with his rifle, promising to return with meat. That was 19 days ago. The high desert of New Mexico stretched endlessly, a sea of sage and sand punctuated by distant purple mountains. The year was 1878, and Elena, 17, watched her sister sleep in the wagon's shade. Luz was only 11, her face hollow with hunger, dark hair tangled despite Elena's daily attempts at braiding. Their routine was sacred. Wake before dawn to collect dew from the canvas, share it equally. Though Elena often pretended to drink more than she took, search for prickly pear fruits and wild onions. Count supplies, 4 strips of jerky, handful of beans, cornmeal for perhaps 3 more days. Then wait. Elena had learned the desert's language. How wind shifted before storms, the quality of light preceding bone-deep cold, coyote calls that meant they were being watched. She'd grown thin, her dress hanging loose, but her hands stayed steady. Someone had to guard their small hope. Elena. Luz's voice came soft from the wagon, thick with sleep and thirst. I'm here, pequeña. Elena climbed up beside her sister, the wagon creaking. The bed still smelled faintly of oranges they'd carried from California. I dreamed about water again, a whole river, clear and cold. Elena smoothed her sister's fevered hair. Tell me about it. Luz described blue-green water like their mother's wedding ring, trees with real shade, fish jumping silver in sunlight, fresh bread with butter, cold milk. Her eyes held careful brightness, trying not to cry. Do you think Papa's coming back? Elena said, the words worn smooth. The desert's big. It takes time. But both heard what wasn't said. The desert kept what it took. Bleached bones along their westward journey testified to that truth. Elena looked toward the horizon where heat waves danced. Somewhere beyond lay Santa Fe. 3 days' walk for a strong man with water, perhaps 5 for a girl carrying her sister. They had perhaps a day's water left. At midday she heard hoofbeats on hardpan. Elena's heart quickened. Papa, perhaps. Or travelers with water. Or men with different intentions. She positioned herself between Luz and the sound, hand-finding their father's heavy pistol beneath folded blankets. The rider appeared first as Shimmer, then as dark figure on horseback leading a pack mule. Wide-brimmed hat, grayed beard, clothes speaking of long travel. He rode easy, comfortable with distance. 50 yards away, he stopped. Morning, he called. You folks all right out here? Elena said nothing. The stranger dismounted, ground-tying his horse with casual confidence. Slowly, he reached for something tied to his saddle. Got some water here, he said, lifting a canteen. And jerky. You look like you could use both. He stepped closer. Elena could see his face, weathered but not unkind, eyes like winter sky. I'm Samuel Morrison. Been riding from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. Got plenty to share. He set the canteen between them and stepped back. No strings. Sometimes folks just need help. Elena stared at the canteen, hearing water move inside when wind nudged it. Her throat felt like sand. What do you want? She whispered. Samuel Morrison pushed back his hat, revealing silver-streaked hair. Nothing you can't give freely. Just to see you and your sister get where you're going safely. The words hung between them like a promise. Elena looked at Luz, saw hope and hunger warring in her sister's eyes. In the silence, a hawk circled overhead. The desert waited. Elena released her sister's hand and climbed down from the wagon. The water was real. Elena lifted the canteen with trembling hands. More water than they'd seen in days. Clean, no scent of alkali. She drank carefully, forcing small sips, then passed it to Luce. Samuel Morrison had moved to his horse, giving them space. From his pack came jerky, hardtack, dried fruit wrapped in oiled cloth. He set it beside the water and retreated. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Santa Fe," Elena said. He nodded. "That's where I'm going too. Good timing." "Your father?" he asked gently. Elena's throat tightened. "Hunting." Samuel looked at tracks around the wagon, expanding circles where someone had searched for game, places where a man had sat before walking north into emptiness. No returning tracks. "I see," he said quietly. He began setting up camp with practiced efficiency. Fire ring of stones, kindling from dried sage, coffee pot filled with water. "Coffee?" Elena hadn't tasted coffee in weeks. "We don't have anything to trade." Samuel Morrison looked at her with those winter sky eyes. "Did I ask for anything?" As coffee brewed, Elena studied this stranger. Well-made but worn clothes, functional gear, a man who valued substance over show. "Why help us?" she asked. "You don't know us?" Samuel Morrison poured coffee into tin cups. Steam rose like incense. "Had a daughter once, about your age." His voice held grief worn smooth. "Cholera took her and my wife, summer of '74. Been traveling since, looking for, well, not sure what. But I know what it feels like to need help." Elena sipped the bitter, perfect coffee. "We're not your responsibility." "No, you're not." He stared at the desert where dust devils spun brief lives. "Tell me about California." Elena spoke of orange groves where Papa found work after losing the Missouri farm. Chinese workers who taught Luce paper folding. Mission bells ringing across valleys. The day Papa announced they were leaving, eyes bright with new possibility. Samuel Morrison listened without interruption. When Elena finished, the sun had moved across the sky. "Sounds like good country." It was. But Papa always believed the next place would be better. Said a man could build something lasting in New Mexico. Elena looked at their broken wagon, sleeping sister, vast emptiness. Doesn't feel that way now. Samuel Morrison moved to his pack, returning with needle, thread, leather, wagon grease. "Mind if I look at your wheel?" Elena had grown so accustomed to their wagon's broken state she'd stopped thinking it could be fixed. He spent the afternoon working with methodical patience, occasionally asking Elena to hold something. As day cooled toward evening, Luce woke and watched with fascination. "Are you fixing it?" she asked. "Doing my best. Won't be pretty, but should hold to Santa Fe." That night they shared beans and hardtack around Samuel's fire. He'd refused their supplies, insisting he had plenty. "Tomorrow we start early," he said. "Desert's easier on horses in morning hours." "Horses?" Elena asked. Samuel nodded toward his pack mule. "Brought extra lead rope for a reason. Your wagon's light enough she can pull without strain." Elena stared. "You planned this?" "Planned to help if I found folks who needed it." "Why?" "Because the desert's big enough to swallow all of us if we don't look out for each other. And because some things are worth doing when nobody's watching." That night, Elena lay listening to Luce's steady breathing and distant coyote howls. For the first time in weeks, sleep came without gnawing fear. She woke to coffee smell and Samuel Morrison preparing for the journey ahead. The wagon wheels turned for the first time in 23 days. Samuel's mule pulled steadily, the repaired wheel holding despite its patchwork appearance. The desert revealed itself differently from the road. Subtle variations appeared, sage thick enough for rabbit shelter, arroyos carved into red stone sculptures, mountains showing individual peaks. Samuel Morrison named as they passed. "Sierra de los Alamos," he said, pointing northeast. "And those are the Sangre de Cristos, blood of Christ mountains. Spanish named them for sunset colors." After weeks seeing nothing but their small circle of desert, the world felt enormous again. On the second day, smoke rose thin and straight ahead. "Trading post," Samuel Morrison said. "Belongs to Miguel Delgado, good man." Buildings emerged, adobe and stone main structure, outbuildings, corrals with horses standing hip-shot in afternoon heat. The sight of other people made Elena's chest tight. Inside, the trading post was cool and dim, shelves stocked with everything from ammunition to preserved fruits. Miguel Delgado was silver-haired, his manner suggesting comfort with travelers from every walk of life. He greeted Samuel Morrison like an old friend. "From California," Delgado mused, studying Elena. "Long journey for one so young." "And your father?" "Lost," Elena said simply. Delgado nodded with understanding of a man who'd heard many such stories. "You are welcome here. My house is your house." They stayed 2 days. Delgado insisted they sleep in guest quarters rather than camp. His wife Maria, small with silver hair and quick hands, took personal offense at their thinness. "Eat," Maria commanded, setting beans and fresh tortillas before Luz. "You are nothing but bones and eyes." Elena treasured fresh water from the well, clean clothes, sleeping under solid roof. Samuel Morrison checked their wagon and gear, preparing for the final push to Santa Fe. On their last evening, Elena found Samuel Morrison alone on the portal. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too comfortable. I'd gotten used to things being difficult." They watched stars emerge in clear desert sky. "What will you do in Santa Fe?" he asked. "Find work. Get loose in school. Try to build the life Papa was looking for." "That's a tall order for someone not yet 18. "I'm all she has left." Samuel Morrison turned to look at her. "You know you don't have to do it alone." Elena felt something shift in her chest. "I don't understand." "Santa Fe's a good town, growing fast. But it's also a place where a young woman and her sister could use someone looking out for them." "What are you saying?" Samuel Morrison was quiet, stepping carefully across words. "I'm saying I've been traveling alone 4 years, and I'm tired of it. You and Luce reminded me what it feels like to have family. If you were willing, I'd like to help you build that life your father was looking for." Elena stared. "You barely know us." "I know enough. You kept your sister alive 3 weeks in desert when most would have given up. You're brave and stubborn and careful with what matters. Luce trusts you completely. That trust isn't given lightly. But we're nothing to you." Samuel Morrison smiled in the darkness. "You're everything I've been looking for, without knowing I was looking. A reason to stop wandering, a place to belong." Elena realized she was crying, not from sadness, but from hope. What would that look like? "However you wanted. I've got money saved from 4 years traveling light. Enough to buy land, build a house, start something lasting." He paused. "I'm not talking charity. I'm talking family. choosing to be responsible for each other. Elena looked at stars that had witnessed their desperation and were now seeing this impossible offer of salvation. I need to think. Course you do. But Elena already knew her answer. Had known from the moment he'd set that first canteen down and asked for nothing. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Yes, if you're sure. Samuel Morrison took her hand. Calloused, warm, steady. I mean every word. The next morning they loaded the wagon and set out with sun at their backs and mountains growing larger ahead. Everything felt different now. The desert no longer seemed hostile, but simply landscape to pass through toward somewhere else. Somewhere that would be home. 3 days later, they crested the final hill and saw Santa Fe spread below. A city of adobe and ambition, ancient streets and new possibilities. Luz clapped at the sight. Elena walked beside Samuel Morrison's horse, one hand on the wagon, feeling her sister's weight, steady and alive and safe. In her other hand, she carried reins of their future, uncertain still, but no longer desperate. Behind them, desert stretched toward California and the life they'd left. Ahead lay everything they'd been traveling toward. The chance to belong, to build something lasting, to discover what family could mean when chosen, rather than inherited. As they reached the city's outskirts, Samuel Morrison looked down and smiled. Welcome home, he said. For the first time in her life, Elena knew exactly what he meant. 6 months later, the house Samuel Morrison built stood on a hill overlooking Santa Fe, adobe walls golden in afternoon light. From the portal where Elena sat shelling beans, she could see the plaza where merchants hawked wares and children played. Luz was walking home from school where she'd learned to read English alongside Spanish. Made friends with girls whose families had been in the territory for generations. Elena could see her small figure in blue dress, carrying books with the careful dignity of someone who'd learned education was precious. The beans made soft percussion falling into the bowl. Elena had learned to appreciate these quiet domestic sounds. Rhythm of work that built rather than merely sustained. The garden grew thick with vegetables. Chickens provided eggs. The cow gave milk rich enough for cheese and butter. Simple abundance. Elena had discovered abundance wasn't having everything, but enough of what mattered. Samuel Morrison emerged from the stable, moving more slowly these days, but with visible contentment. He'd found work as a territorial government guide, leading survey teams into mountains, mapping land for coming railroads. Luz coming up the hill? He asked, settling beside Elena. Just turned off the main road. They watched their youngest family member navigate the rocky path with sure-footedness of someone who'd learned to walk carefully through difficult terrain. She'd grown, not just taller, but steadier, laugh coming easier, sleep untroubled. Miguel sent word, Samuel Morrison said. Trading posts doing well. Maria's expecting you for Christmas dinner. Elena smiled. The network of relationships felt like roots growing deep. Miguel and Maria Delgado, Father Martinez at church, other families drawn by the same promises that brought them west. We'll go. Luz would never forgive me if we missed Maria's tamales. Samuel Morrison chuckled. Neither would I. Luz reached the gate and waved, school books clutched under one arm. Sister Catherine says I might be ready for advanced reader by spring, she announced. And Tommy Martinez asked if I wanted to sit with him at lunch tomorrow. Elena and Samuel exchanged a look. Luz was discovering the world held more than survival and fear. As evening settled and mountains turned purple, the three sat on their portal, watching lights come on below. Somewhere someone played guitar, music drifting up on thin air. Elena thought about the girl she'd been in that broken wagon, believing survival was the best she could hope for. That girl seemed like a stranger now, glimpsed through heat waves. Real, but distant. She thought about Papa, wondered what he'd make of their life built from ashes of his dreams. Would he approve of Samuel Morrison, this steady man who'd taken responsibility for daughters not his own? "What are you thinking about?" Samuel Morrison asked quietly. "How strange things work out. If we hadn't gotten stuck. If you hadn't come along. But I did come along. You were brave enough to trust a stranger. Here we are. Here we are." As darkness settled, they moved inside where Samuel Morrison lit oil lamps and Elena prepared dinner. Luce settled with books, tongue poking out in concentration. Ordinary evening in an ordinary house, filled with ordinary sounds of family being together. But Elena had learned ordinary could be its own miracle when it came after a time when ordinary seemed impossible. Later, after Luce was in bed and dishes washed, Elena and Samuel Morrison sat on the portal watching stars emerge. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked. "Stopping for us that day? Taking on two strangers with nothing to offer?" Samuel Morrison was quiet so long Elena thought he wouldn't answer. "You know what I regret? I regret that it took 4 years of wandering to understand home isn't a place you find. It's something you build with people who matter. I regret waiting so long to stop looking for something I already had the capacity to create." Elena leaned against his shoulder, solid and warm. "I'm glad you stopped when you did." "So am I." Above them, stars that had witnessed their desperation now looked down on their contentment. The desert was still out there, vast and unforgiving, waiting to test the next travelers. But here, in this house built from chosen love and mutual care, they had created something that could withstand anything the wilderness offered. Tomorrow there would be work, Samuel Morrison riding with survey crews, Elena tending garden, Luce learning something new about the world and her place in it. But tonight, there was only this. 3 of them together, safe and fed and home, under stars that had seen them through darkest hours and now blessed their brightest ones. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Winter arrived slowly in Santa Fe, brushing frost over rooftops and layering thin ice along the shaded edges of the river. The sun still shone most days, but the air had a new sharpness that made chickens huddle tighter, made firewood stacks shrink faster. Inside the Morrison house, mornings began with steam rising from mugs and Luce reading aloud by lamp glow. Elena listened while kneading dough, sometimes correcting a mispronounced word, sometimes letting the silence stretch just to hear her daughter's voice fill the room. Samuel had taken to wearing a scarf Elena had woven from leftover yarn. He laughed when Luce teased him for being as bundled as an onion, but he wore it every day nonetheless. One Sunday afternoon, as they walked home from church with baskets of oranges and flour gifted by neighbors, they passed a family arriving in town. Parents thin with travel, a boy and girl clinging close, eyes wide. The girl had no shoes. Elena paused. "Do you think—" Samuel nodded before she finished. "Yes." That night, Elena and Luce packed a parcel. Blankets, cornmeal, a pair of Luce's shoes, now slightly too small. "She'll grow into them," Luce whispered. "Or she'll have warm feet now." The next day, Elena delivered the bundle with quiet grace, leaving it at the boarding house without fanfare. As she walked away, she felt the familiar ache in her chest, the kind that wasn't pain, but memory. A reminder of what it felt like to be received when you had nothing but need. Later, Samuel would find her on the portal, hands wrapped around tea, staring into the late sun. I want her to feel safe," she said. "She will, because now someone in this town will see her, just like someone once saw you." Elena smiled softly. "Is this what healing feels like?" "No," Samuel said, setting his hand over hers. "This is what giving it away feels like." By late January, the wind came colder through the canyons, carrying scent of pine smoke and distant snow. Luce had taken to collecting kindling after school, her boots leaving tidy tracks through pale dust. She worked quietly, sometimes humming a tune from church, sometimes lost in thoughts she hadn't yet learned how to voice. One evening, Elena found her daughter staring at the hearth, firelight flickering in her dark eyes. "Are you ever scared?" Luz asked. Elena sat beside her. "I was, many times. But fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're paying attention." Luz nodded slowly, then whispered, "Tommy says his brother might go fight in Mexico." Elena exhaled, watching the fire dance. People have always fought, sometimes for land, sometimes for pride. But peace begins when someone chooses not to return harm for harm. "Is that what you did? When Papa died?" Elena turned, surprised by the softness of the question. "I chose to survive. And then I chose to live." Luce leaned her head against Elena's arm. "I want to choose that too." The days passed, marked by soup on the stove, letters from Maria with updates on the new baby, and Samuel's return each week with stories of terrain, weather, men arguing over lines no one could see in the dirt. One night he brought home a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Payment," he explained. One of the farmers had no money. Inside were hand-carved wooden animals, a fox, a sheep, a woman holding a bowl. Luce cradled them like treasures. "They're perfect." "They're honest," Samuel said. "You can feel it." Later, after supper, Elena lined them on the shelf beside Luce's books. Not expensive, but sacred in their simplicity. Proof that value lived in intention, not price. Before bed, Luce placed the carved woman by her pillow. "She looks like you," she told Elena, "like someone who holds something important." Elena touched the smooth wood, heart full. Maybe she does. That night, as wind swept across the hills and the stars returned to their ancient watch, the little house stood firm. Not grand, not rich, but strong in the quiet way of a place built with love, brick by brick, choice by choice. And inside 3 lives rested, knowing tomorrow would bring more work, more lessons, more chances to give back what they'd once received. It was enough. It was home.